This is the second office hours that I am hosting. The first one was in regards to project billing, and I have since posted on YouTube, and we've got a lot of people watching, asking questions, which is great. The whole goal of these is to answer questions, or if you don't have questions, to share some of the knowledge that I've had in working with ConnectWise and show some tips and tricks as well as gotchas that I see people run into when they use ConnectWise. Today, we're going to talk about the product catalog. If you have any questions, Josh, to your point, just ask them. Just as a reminder, this session is being recorded, so I probably will post it to YouTube. If you ask questions I can't answer, I will not post it. No, I'm kidding.
You make yourself look good.
Yeah, if it goes poorly, then this never happened. But do not share company specific information. So if you work with me, you know that sometimes I'll ask you to share your screen and I want to look at it and walk through it. We won't be doing that here. I will replicate anything in my demo environment just so you're not sharing any proprietary information. Sound good to everyone?
Yeah. All right.
Awesome. All right, well, let's kick it off. Can everyone see my ConnectWise environment here? Looking good.
Yep.
Awesome. Okay, so we'll start at the beginning. What is the product catalog? When we talk about the product catalog, it's all sitting here under procurement product catalog. And what I want to mention about this and where some people get stuck is when you're working in the product catalog, you're working on the master version of that product. So you're working on the list price, the description that you would normally use, the cost that you would normally use, anything that would be standard for that product. When you are quoting a product for a job, it needs to already exist in the product catalog. So you do need to have it here to be able to pull it up later. But when you quote a specific job, if you change the price or cost on an opportunity, on a sales order, on an agreement, it does not write back to the product catalog. So the catalog is what I like to call the product master. And then when you do job specific pieces and you're quoting it, those can be changed. People always ask me, well, what price should I put in? What cost should I put in the product master, in the product catalog? It's whatever price and cost you normally use. You can overwrite it later. It does not have to be correct all the time, but it should be correct most of the time. So that's the differentiation between the product catalog and the products you use on jobs. The most complicated thing about the product catalog is the product class. So we'll hop into that one right away and just swallow the frog. When it comes to product classes and you're creating a new product class is how your product behaves within the ConnectWise Manage, ConnectWise PSA environment. If you get this wrong, it's really best practice to go back and fix it and create another product, and I'll show you why. In your system, ideally, everything should default to non-inventory product class. If you're using ConnectWise Cell, ConnectWise CPQ, there is a section in which you can choose the default for your product class when it comes from Cell CPQ into PSA Manage. And I always recommend that be a non-inventory class. The reason being is that you can change from a non-inventory class to any of these other classes. But once you make something an inventory class, a bundle, a service, or an agreement class product, it gets locked in. So if you're seeing things come through by default as inventory class, you will want to look at your cell settings to make sure that you change that to non-inventory. I've had to do that with so many of my clients, but non-inventory is where we want to start. Non-inventory product classes allow you the most flexibility within ConnectWise. And non-inventory product classes are things that you purchase. So they can be things that you purchase. They are things that you are not going to stock. You're not going to put any of the items on the shelf. You're going to buy them specifically for jobs and send them out. Or they are things that you are going to charge for, but aren't a physical product. A really good example are fees. So if you're charging any fee for anything, in BC, we have an environmental fee. There's something you can do there. Any fee, if you have a shipping fee that you want to charge, if you have a tariff that you want to charge, those should all be non-inventory class products. And I like to make these non-inventory class products because non-inventory class products can be picked and shipped, which we'll get into probably next week, without needing any inventory on hand. So you can fulfill demand for non-inventory products out of thin air. You can say, yes, we have charged the client this, and yes, we have shipped it. And you can mark something as shipped without having any inventory on the shelf. You don't need to have stock available, or you don't need to buy something to fulfill a non-inventory class product. Conversely, inventory class products starts to actually do math in the ConnectWise system. So if you want to try and pick an inventory class product or ship an inventory class product, your system is going to check to make sure that you actually have the product sitting on hand or that you have purchased product for this demand to be fulfilled. Inventory class products are for products that you use frequently, that you carry excess of. So if you have additional products sitting on the shelf, not allocated to any job, you will want them to be inventory. And if there is something that gets returned from a client. So if you bought something and it's a one-off and you may never use this product again, but for some reason you can't return it to the supplier, you want to make sure that you can see that product in your system. You will make it an inventory class just to keep an eye on it. People think that, oh, well, because I don't use it very frequently, it must stay as a non-inventory. There's a good chance you'll lose the product at that point. You want to keep anything that you're keeping as extra or that has been returned and you want to keep an eye on and make it a inventory class product. As always, I started very fast. Any questions on the difference between an inventory and a non-inventory class product and when you might use either or?
Good.
Awesome. Great. So those are, and usually inventory and non-inventory class products are physical goods. So they're physical goods. They are licenses a lot of the time. We can see licenses as a non-inventory product, or they are intangible things like fees, charges, things that you want to bill the customer. Service is next. Service is also complicated because service should be hours that you provide your customer. When you change the product class to service, it changes the behavior of the product. As soon as I changed this from inventory or non-inventory to service, you'll notice that the price attribute field came and is no longer grayed out. And I'll do that again. So when we're in inventory, there's no price attribute. When I'm in non-inventory, no price attribute. As soon as I go into service, this price attribute can be determined. When you have a price attribute, you can start to determine how you are quoting your service and how you are using this service SKU. If you want to quote project management time, and you're going to be quoting it in your CPQ or quoting system, and you're quoting it as service, if you're quoting it as fixed fee, you want to set the price attribute as fixed fee. This will have knock-on effects when we start to convert to projects, so you'll be able to see that. If you have project management that you quote as a fixed fee, and you have project management that you quote as, that you don't quote, that you sell as time and materials, you will want to have a different project management product for each of those attributes. So it will seem like you have duplicates, but you will have a fixed fee project management and a time and materials project management. And maybe project management isn't the best example for that. So we'll do installation, time and materials, and then you would also have one for fixed fee. The reason being is how these convert. So we'll look at that when we get to the project conversion. But again, if you are quoting labor, it's best to make sure that you have one for each if you're doing fixed fee and time and materials. Those are the two I see most frequently. Not to exceed, I don't see that frequently, to be honest. Again, it means what it says, which is not to exceed. So it bills time and materials up to that amount, and then it wouldn't go over. So it turns into a fixed fee once it hits that maximum. And then override rate, we normally don't do override rates from here. When you have a service product class, it's labor that you provide internally. If you sell subcontract labor, usually when I come into my client environments, I see this as a service. You can handle it one of two ways. I actually like to make my subcontract labor a non-inventory class product. And the reason being is that if I make it a non-inventory class product, it's going to show up in my purchasing screen, and then I can actually put a PO together for that subcontractor. I'm a big believer that every single invoice your company gets should have a corresponding purchase order, or as much as possible. So if you get an invoice from a subcontractor, it should match up to one or multiple purchase orders within your environment so that you can go ahead and reconcile that. And Josh and Armin, I think you guys are doing subcontractors with purchase orders. Is that correct? Yeah, awesome. So it's nice for reconciliation. I think it's probably just annoying because you have to ship all those subcontractor parts.
It's one extra step.
Yeah, exactly. It's one extra step, but it helps to keep an eye on things. And especially when you're growing and scaling and using a lot of subcontractors, you can start to get out of hand and have some sprawl or have subcontractors work a lot more or spend more on subcontractors than you originally planned, which affects your project profitability, affects your ticket profitability. Using subcontractors as a non-inventory product class and cutting POs also allows you to do reporting to see what your subcontractor spend was per subcontractor, per quarter, if it's going up or down, etc. Awesome. So service. The other thing I would say about service uh, class products, I like to match these to my work roles. And we'll go on a little journey because people say, well, what should I have in my uh, service class products? In your system, you have work roles. You have billable rates that you're setting up for the different roles within your organization. Best practice and the way to keep everything clean is to get these work roles determined early. So have a company-wide understanding of what your work roles are and make sure that everyone understands what their specific work role is. In a very clean system, what I would expect to see is every single one of these work roles would also be a product ID, and there would be duplicates, or there would be two of any work roles that are used differently. So installation might have a fixed fee and a time and materials. System engineer might have a fixed fee and a time and materials, etc. The cleaner and fewer you can keep your work roles, making sure everyone agrees on what this amount is You would be shocked at how long this takes, usually internally, to get alignment on what your rates actually are. And then when you build your product catalog, you would make your price the same. So we would take installation as a time and materials, and the unit price for this would be $150. This is going to help you for reporting a lot later, especially when it comes to anything to do with projects. As the last step of this in CPQ, what you quote, the ones that you quote should also line up. So by taking these work roles, building them into your product catalog, then you would go into your CPQ quoting environment, pull these all in on a services tab with 0 quantity, save that as a tab template, then everyone's quoting the same. Sorry, is there a question?
No, sorry, my phone was ringing.
It's okay. Yeah, and that's sort of my trifecta of success is that if you have your work roles, do those first. Take your work roles, put them into the product catalog. That's second. Then upload your products onto your services tab of your quote template and save that as a tab template with, again, the same prices. Everything will flow really nicely if that goes the way it should. I also get questions on costs. So when it comes to, well, what should the cost be? You do have individual member costs. Everyone has a specific cost attributed to them in the member profile. I like to put the cost here as what the average cost is. What you're using this product for when you're quoting is to determine margin. So you would put 8 hours of installation, let's say fixed fee installation on a quote. You would want to know what that margin would be or what that estimated margin would be. So put in what the average cost is for that or whatever would give you the most accurate margin calculation there. Awesome. Okay, so that kind of covers the classes. We'll go into agreement classes. Agreement classes are for items that you do not purchase. So you will not purchase them. You will normally use them to create an agreement header, or they are going to be things that land on the agreement additions tab. If you import from Pax8, if you have someone like SureWeb who's managing your SKUs, a lot of the time they'll import and ask you to put them in as an agreement class product. That's all well and good. Agreement class products will not go through the purchasing flow, so you won't ever see them on a purchase order, which breaks my cardinal rule of purchase orders matching invoices. But if they're managed by a third party, that's fine. That reconciliation is being done outside of the system, so you don't need to worry about that. Agreement class products really only work on agreements. You can add them to sales orders. They can be on projects, but they don't behave very nicely on those vehicles, on those billing records. So they keep in mind when you're putting something on as an agreement class product, it should end up on an agreement. For agreement class products, they're usually recurring. So let's pretend this is a monthly recurring license that we want to bill to a client. You are going to build that product a little bit differently. Till now, we've been talking about a unit price and a unit cost up here. It's worth mentioning that these are one-time prices and one-time costs. When you have a product and you need to have a customer description, that is not a one-time product and you're selling it on a monthly basis, you don't want there to be a unit price or a unit cost. You want there to be a recurring monthly price and a recurring monthly cost. So I'm going to go ahead and zero out these unit prices and unit costs. And I'll scroll down to this enable recurrence pod. You'll notice that I saved the product before I went and scrolled down. It's because this enable recurrence pod only shows up after you've saved the product. So you want to save it first, and I'll just save it with the $0 price, $0 cost, and scroll down here. This is where you can start to build out products that you are going to charge for on a monthly, yearly, quarterly basis. You will turn on the enable recurrence. And here is where you're going to put in the monthly, in this case, we'll do monthly revenue and cost. You can see here that the billing cycle is default to monthly. My system has a default billing cycle to monthly, and I'm going to keep that. And I'm going to change this to contract year. What this is saying is that this product is going to charge $3 a month to the customer. It's going to cost me $1.50 a month. And the cycle type is the contract year. So if something starts in September and it's going to go for 12 months, it will go for 12 months from September, not the calendar year. I'm going to go ahead and hit save. And then you'll notice that the cycles is grayed out, the start date and the end date is grayed out. Don't panic. The reason that these are grayed out is because you're in the product master. There is no general start date or general end date for this product. You will fill in the specific start date, specific end date, and specific number of cycles for this product on the job that you're quoting it for. So just because it's not here doesn't mean anything. All you need to do is make sure that you've enabled that recurrence, and now you have a monthly recurring product that you can quote for future recurring revenue. Any questions around recurrent?
No,
Great.
it's straightforward.
It is straightforward, but I think where people get a little tripped up is that when they come here and they look at price. So someone's saying, okay, yeah, I entered a new product. And then they come to the product catalog and they see this price of 0 and they go, oh my gosh, did I not do it correctly? But you have to scroll over and see the recurring revenue and recurring cost. So when you're looking at the product catalog as a whole, make sure that you can see both the price and cost. Imagine these say one-time price and one-time cost, and then there's the recurring revenue, recurring cost. I have scared myself so many times, and I'm just getting an internet connection, so let me know if you can still hear me. Uh, I've scared myself so many times that I've actually started to show the recurring symbol in my product catalog. And you can do that by going into the gear and finding there should be a little recurring button, but it's not here. It might be,
Right there.
oh, am I here? Am I blind?
Did it not say recurring like those?
Yeah, there's these, and then there's one that just says recurring, and it shows the little icon, like a circle with two arrows. So I don't know where that is, but when you have that, you can make it visible, and then you can actually see if your product is recurring. I don't know what they did with it. I'll add an amendment to this video. We'll cut this whole part out. No.
All
All
right.
right. So yeah, there's a way to check if it's recurring or not. If you don't have that, like me, then you want to make sure that you can see the price, cost, recurring revenue, recurring cost. I always set my products to be default as taxable. I think that that's just a best practice. And yeah, I think we're good for recurring. Let's scroll back up and come into product type. I'm not going to talk about product type too much. It is a accounting thing, and it's normally a QuickBooks behavior of how the product is going to behave in QuickBooks. What I will say is that this is not your field to edit and change. Please don't go in and change this to be hardware, labor, all these different things. Use the out of the box product types because they do have right to functionalities in QuickBooks. The other thing I'll say about product types is that they should usually match. So if your product class is inventory, your product type should be inventory. If your product class is non-inventory, your product type should be non-inventory. Service, service, and then agreement can be non-inventory or other charge. And I have a little handout that I'll attach to this and send to everyone to make sure that you can know which ones you're choosing. Not too much else on that. Just please don't change these, even though you can, don't change these. The only time that I've seen them change that makes sense is if you have a zero integration and you're in the UK. Some of the naming conventions do change slightly, so you will have to change these. Your zero person will be able to tell you what those need to be. So that is fine. Continuing on the accounting integration and how things map to the accounting package, the product type is only going to send over the first time. So if you have something as a non-inventory product type and then you purchase it, you receive it, the receiving record goes over to QuickBooks, it's going to create a non-inventory product in your product catalog. If later you change the product type to an inventory class product, it may not update the product in QuickBooks. So whenever you're making product type changes, go into your QuickBooks environment and make sure that they've been replicated. 8 times out of 10, they have not. So you will need to update the product type in your QuickBooks environment when you change it in your ConnectWise environment. I know that's been a real pain for some of us here for month-end inventory reconciliation. Awesome. Okay, continuing that, we're going to get into category and subcategory. The reasons to use category and subcategory are twofold. One is management accounting, management reporting, understanding what it is that you're selling. So everyone asks me, well, what categories should I have and what subcategories should I have? I have an example, which I'll post as well, but it should be what you think is important. So, what questions are you going to ask of your data and what makes sense for your current product catalog? What you can do is take your current product catalog and run it through an AI to ask it to group things into categories and subcategories and see if those make sense. Or you can take a top-down approach and say that you want to do it starting with these specific categories and then break everything out. I always recommend having a category called hardware, and then you can start to break out what type of hardware it is. The question that someone might ask of their data is, how many servers did we sell last year compared to the year before? Because of the different number of SKUs, because you have so many different kinds of servers, it would be hard to aggregate that data if you didn't classify them under one bucket. So the subcategory is how we are saying these are all servers. If we ever wanted to run any reports or learn anything about our sales, sales trends, what we're selling more of, what we're replacing a lot, the subcategory is going to give us that information. Again, you can go through and put in these. If you find that everything is sitting under one subcategory, you might need to make your subcategories smaller. But usually what I see is that people get way too in the weeds with their subcategories when they start. So try and limit it. Start small. Don't have too many categories and subcategories from the start. Just have as few as you think you can get away with. You can always add more later. With the category, you should always have a category called service. And within the services, you can have the different services that you provide. I like to have one called accessories. I don't usually have one called block time, so I don't know why it's there. And then there's going to be one that's miscellaneous. This is where I put things like fees, tariffs, anything that might be really, really specific. I put that in a miscellaneous category, and then the name of the subcategory is usually the name of the product ID. For those, I like to keep it really simple. So let's say we're talking about fees. if I'm not charging a ton of fees, then I would probably make one SKU called fees, and I would update the description every time I used it. What I mean by this is that I wouldn't make 20 product IDs for fees unless I use them all the time and I wanted to track them all separately. I would make one product ID called fees, and then I would have the salesperson, the ops person, whomever is charging the fee to the customer, update what that fee is and update it in the customer description. The reason being is you don't want to clutter your product catalog unnecessarily. And when you're rolling out a new product, you want to try and limit it and make sure that not a lot of people are creating a lot of different SKUs. You want to have as few SKUs as possible and everyone using the same SKUs. So fees would be to be updated, non-inventory product class, non-inventory product type, category would be miscellaneous, and then subcategory would be fees. This is the same as OFE. So some of my clients will have owner furnished inventory. Not everyone will, but we'll just put it in. If you are doing a job and your client has supplied some of the product, you are not selling this to your customer. You are just working around the product or you're working with the product, you might want to have a very complete bill of materials that includes the products the customer is providing. When you do this, you can make an owner furnished, owner supplied product and put in the must be updated. Keep this as a $0 price and a $0 cost, non-inventory product class, non-inventory product type. And when you're building out the bill of materials, put in the customer SKU in the description. So put in whatever the owner supplied inventory is. How this is going to look is on your bill of materials, you'll have a list of all the products you're supplying with prices and costs. And then you might have 10 lines of OFE, OFE, OFE with different descriptions of what those different things are. So that's one way to handle anything that is being supplied by the customer. You'll notice that when we are putting in a new product or a new product is created, the default category is must change, must change. I like to have this set up because it's a quick gotcha that shows anything that is new within the system. And categories and subcategories, as I mentioned earlier, have two purposes. So they do have that reporting aspect of, how many servers did we sell last year? But they also have GL mapping implications. And I think this is where people get stuck. And this is where there's a huge disconnect sometimes between operations and accounting. The categories and subcategories that you choose, if you map a category to a specific GL account, then every product that is created under that subcategory is going to go to that GL account. And let's do one for fees right now. So I'm actually going to set up a new subcategory for fees. And I'm just going into my system, setup tables, subcategory. I'm going to create a new subcategory and I'm going to call it fees and I'm going to put it under the category of miscellaneous. I'm not going to change anything else. I've just created this subcategory. Now, let's say anytime there's a fee, I want it to go to one specific account in my GL. Anytime you create a new category or subcategory, I would recommend checking the GL or talking to finance about what the GL mapping is. Because as soon as you create a category or subcategory, you're going to go into system, setup tables, and we're going to look at the GL. And here I'm going to look at to see if there's anything mapped. There won't be, but I will see if there's anything mapped for fees, and there isn't. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new GL mapping. I'll hit the plus sign, and I'm going to map this at a revenue product level. This means that anytime the fee product is sold on a sales order, service ticket, or project, any one-time invoice, it's going to use this mapping. I'm going to map it at the subcategory level. I'm going to choose my mapped record, which will be miscellaneous, the category, fees, the subcategory, and I'll put in whatever account it is that this needs to map to. This means that anything created with a fee, and it might not have come across yet. Yeah. Anything that's been created with this is going to go to this account. That means it will override any GL mapping that exists in the system because subcategory is one of the most discrete levels you can map to. You can, yeah, it's the most discrete one you can map to. You can map by project type or service type. I don't recommend doing it. The most discrete I recommend is subcategory, and that's going to override any of the mappings because it's very, very small in terms of the size of things that are actually going into it. The other mapping that you might need to build, if it is a recurring product, so if it is something that's going to show up on an agreement invoice, is you need to map it at the revenue agreement product. When you do that, you're going to do the exact same thing, product subcategory, and we're going to say miscellaneous fees, and we'll put, if it's the same account, put the same account in. If it's a different account, put a different account in. Why this matters in terms of your mappings is that you can use the same product and sell it one time and have it go to one GL account, and the same product can be sold on a monthly basis and go to a different GL account. It just depends on if you're putting it towards revenue agreement product, your recurring products on agreements, or if you're putting it on your revenue product, your one-time products. Usually, I recommend when you're building a GL mapping, build both at the same time. So don't just build your revenue product GL mapping, build your revenue product and your revenue agreement product at the same time, just to cover your bases. A lot of finance information out of nowhere. Any questions on GL mapping? Happy to get into anything there.
No.
No, perfect. Yeah, GLs are fun. We'll come back here. Just be aware of it. If you don't touch the GLs, that's fine. Just know that if you create a new category, create a new subcategory, if you're categorizing products, they may have GL implications. Please check with your finance team before you do that. And then we have unit of measure, which we're just going to leave at each. And then we have a bunch of things that happen down here that you can set in the product master. First up is billable. Most of the time, I would default my products to be billable. It just means that we're going to charge this amount to the customer by default. If you put do not bill, it will not bill to the customer and it will not show up on the invoice. Use that for anything that you want to track as an internal cost. So if you're incurring costs on a job and you want to just have a line that's incurring costs, maybe it's small parts, maybe it's some kind of expenses, you can put it in as a do not bill product to keep the costs on the job. No charge will print the line on the invoice if you're showing line level details, but as $0. So no charge is when you are doing something for free for the customer and you want them to know about it. I almost never put a product in as no charge by default because that's usually job specific. So you'll usually change something to be no charge after the fact, Maybe it's a service ticket and you've decided to give a product away for free. That might be a one-time case. It's very rare that you have a product that you are always giving away for free. So by default, I recommend billable. Awesome. Okay, then we get down here to manufacturer and vendor. I fill these out. You don't have to fill these out, but it's very nice if you do. First up, vendor. If you fill out the vendor, you will be rewarded when it comes to purchasing because as soon as you select the product and say create a purchase order, it will populate that vendor name in the vendor for the purchase order. So the more you fill out the vendor names in your product catalog, the quicker it is to create a purchase order. And if someone new is in your organization or someone who doesn't really know how to purchase, goes ahead and tries to create a purchase order, they will see that vendor name. And this can be thought of as the preferred vendor for your product. It doesn't have to be who you buy it from all the time. You can buy it from other people. It's just who's going to be top of the list when it comes to buying this product. If you want to change the vendor on a purchase order, you absolutely can. If the vendor has a different SKU than you can put in a different SKU here. And then manufacturer, I like to update this because manufacturers are nice when you're doing reporting and when you're trying to say, hey, we buy this amount from Crestron. We'd like to get volume discounts. We'd like to have all these different things happening. That's where you start to put in your manufacturer so you can collect that data. If you go to the vendor section and you search for the company and it's not there, that probably makes sense, especially if you're in a new environment. The company that you want to buy from might not exist. But when you go into the company section, you can see that the company is there. It's because they haven't been marked as a vendor. So let's say I actually buy things from Violet Pixel. This is currently just a customer. They're not a vendor and they won't show up in that vendor list. If you hit the drop down and you put in vendor, and they can be customers and vendors, you don't have to take the customer one away. Now, if I were to look in the company list, I'll be able to see the vendor here. So that's how you're going to add companies into your vendor list to be able to see them. Manufacturers, completely different, in a completely different place. And I don't know why ConnectWise does this, but you would think that you could just type in manufacturer and they would be here. They are not. Manufacturers are set up in the back end. So if you go under system, setup tables, and type in manufacturer, this is where you add your manufacturers and they are just names. So they're not the same company profile. You can't put a lot of information in. You can just put the manufacturer name in. This is really important to note because you need to update this to be able to pull a manufacturer name in cell CPQ. So someone probably should be in charge of coming in, making sure when you have a new manufacturer, you're adding it to the back end so that your salespeople can see it and quote it. And take a quick water break. We're back. Okay. So that's how to update your vendors and manufacturers. You can put internal notes if you want. I don't normally see that. These are some custom fields that I've added. This is from when I used to work at Whirlpool and we had tons of inventory to manage. I like to indicate how old the product is, or if it's a new product, if it's a demo product, if it's a discontinued product, or if it's an obsolete product. The active status is really nice and helpful to keep your product catalog clean. So you can mark some things as being discontinued, and that's just a bit of a flag as you're going through. If you're buying the product, you might want to let a salesperson know, hey, this product is going to be discontinued. We might not be using it anymore. And then once something's obsolete, you can run a report and say anything that's obsolete for 3 months, we're going to inactivate that product and clean it out of the product catalog. So those are just some things that you can start to add on with custom fields to help you manage your overall product catalog. We'll look at the overall product catalog now, and we're just going to talk about cleanup. And one of the first things that I do whenever I come into a new client environment, which is to say that someone should be looking at the products you created. We've been chatting for 40 minutes on all the different checks, things that you need to indicate, update, put in information, GL mapping, etc. It is no small job to manage your product catalog, but the more work you put into having a clean product catalog, the smoother the rest of your system will run. So there should be someone who is in charge of maintaining your product catalog, checking it, making sure that it is up to date. This is why I like to have that must change category as a default. Because if I were coming into a new environment, I could look into the must change category first or subcategory and see all these products. To me, these are unfinished products. They have started to be created, but they have not been finished. They have not been validated. There's a chance that the class and type are incorrect. And this would be my first shortlist of everything that would need to be checked and validated within the system. So you can create a view for that. And the view that we are going to create is called category contains must change or subcategory contains must change. And how you create that view is by going into the product catalog view, hit the plus sign. We're going to call it must change. I like to share my views. It's up to you if you want to share your views or not. You can just define who you want to have access to your views. So if you don't want everyone to have access to it, you can filter that. This is a newer feature of ConnectWise. And then we're going to say category contains must change and hit update. And then I'm going to say plus or because I want either or subcategory contains must change and hit update. Before I save a view, I always run it. So I hit the run section to see if it truncates the full list, which it did, where we see 8 results. And then I'm going to hit save. Now I can see that right away. I'm a huge fan of views. Views are how I navigate the entire ConnectWise system. I hate filtering the same way twice. So if you come into your data and you're looking at it and you're always typing in anything that's other charge and you want to see anything that's a non-inventory class, I don't recommend doing that more than once. I like to save my views so that I can look at them in a row. I also like to number my views by order of priority. So if I always come to the same screen and I do the same 5 things, I will have view 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 to tell me exactly what it is I need to do as soon as I come on that screen. If you decide to share your views, this makes coverage extremely easy because each view should have a list of products that can be actioned the same way. And you could give someone an SOP and say, hey, go to this screen, go to view 1 for everything in view 1, do this. Then go to view 2 for everything in view 2, do this, etc. Of course, I love SOPs, so that's also, part of my process. If you are not as comfortable with building views, but you have a view that you've worked on and you love, and you say, this is exactly how I want to see it every time, then you're going to go into the view editor. You're going to hit the plus sign. And down here, it says load current filters. So go ahead and load the current filters. And that's going to load what you've already typed in. So this is taking the filters that you had already created, and we're going to go ahead and hit save. I don't know why this is giving me this. This is a bad example. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But you should be able to save the views as you are going through them, or you can build views from scratch as we did previously. Then that's the first view. So look at anything that's must change if you have must change in your system. The other views that I always recommend are the created last week and created this week. If I am a procurement person, if I'm the procurement manager, if I'm in charge of the product catalog, I like to keep an eye on anything that has happened, anything that has been touched within the product catalog. So I have a view called created last week. I'm going to create one called created this week. And I'm going to share it. And we're going to say date created equals, and we'll say this week. This is your other way to keep track of everything that's happening because someone might have categorized and subcategorized your product. So it's not going to show up as must change anymore. But every Friday, I would go in and say, look at everything created this week, double check it, make sure I'm happy with it, check the GL codes if needed, and keep an eye on everything just to make sure that I've validated those products. I know two of you have this view for sure, and I think you're doing quite a good job checking that. But it's definitely something that I would recommend. The other thing is salespeople are creating new products in your catalog all the time, whether you're aware of it or not. So if they are using ConnectWise Sell, anytime they create a new opportunity, any new products are going to create a product in your product catalog immediately. It's good to make sure that you are checking those as they go through because otherwise you might not see them until after the job is won, the sales order has been created, the purchase order has been created, and it's a lot harder to change the class of a product and type of a product when it's already on a purchase order versus when it's still on that opportunity and it hasn't been converted yet. That was a ton of information. So I think we're probably going to wrap up there and give you guys some time back. Does anyone have any questions or anything that they might want to see in future office hours?
I'm good. That was well
Awesome.
done. Good job.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Aw.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Armin.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, so next week we're going to
Bye.
go through purchasing. So we'll actually do the purchasing process, and a lot of it builds on this in terms of what you set up in the product catalog and then what purchasing looks like. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Have a great rest of your day. Bye.
Cheers.